In the quiet corner of Columbia University's library, Ava Reynolds sits surrounded by stacks of books. Her dark hair falls over her face as she scribbles notes, but her eyes betray her exhaustion. At 22, she's a senior with dreams bigger than the cramped apartment she shares with her younger brother Jack. She's brilliant, the kind of student professors notice, but life hasn't been kind to her. Jack, only 16, has been battling kidney disease for years, and the medical bills keep piling up. Ava works late shifts at a small coffee shop in New York, barely sleeping just to keep him alive. She pulls out a worn notebook from her bag and writes a few lines. It's her secret journal, a place where she pours out her hopes of becoming a writer someday. But lately, all she writes about is Jack, how she'd give anything to see him healthy again. Her pen pauses as she stares at the page, her heart heavy with worry. Across the city, in a sleek office atop a Manhattan skyscraper, Lucas Grayson leans back in his chair. At 29, he's a billionaire with a name that echoes through New York's elite circles. His sharp features and piercing blue eyes make him striking, but there's a shadow in his gaze. He presses a hand to his chest, wincing as a familiar ache spreads through him. Lucas has a rare condition called dilated cardiomyopathy. His heart is weakening, growing larger and less efficient with every beat. Doctors say he needs a transplant, but the waiting list is long and time is running out. He's lived with this illness since childhood, a secret he guards closely. To the world, he's untouchable, a man who has everything: money, power, influence. But inside, he's alone, haunted by a past where his mother walked away and left him to fend for himself. Trust doesn't come easy to him. People see his wealth, not his pain. Their worlds collide on an ordinary Tuesday evening. Ava's behind the counter at the coffee shop, wiping down tables after a busy shift. The bell above the door jingles and Lucas walks in. He's dressed in a tailored coat, looking out of place among the chipped mugs and worn wooden floors. Ava barely glances up, too tired to care, until he sits at a corner table and orders a black coffee. Minutes later, she notices him clutching his chest, his face paling. Instinct kicks in. She rushes over, asking if he's okay. He fumbles with his coat pocket and she spots a small bottle of pills. Without hesitation, she grabs it, hands him one, and fetches a glass of water. His breathing steadies, and he looks up at her with those striking blue eyes. "Thank you," he murmurs, his voice low and rough. Ava nods, brushing it off, but there's something in his gaze that lingers. Lucas starts coming back, not every day, but often enough that Ava notices. He always sits in the same corner, orders the same coffee, and watches her with a quiet intensity. They exchange small talk at first, about the weather, the city, nothing deep, but over time it shifts. He asks about her studies, and she mentions Columbia, her love for literature. She asks why he's always alone, and he shrugs, saying he prefers it that way. There's a warmth in these moments, a spark neither of them expects. Ava finds herself smiling more when he's around, and Lucas feels a flicker of something he hasn't felt in years. Hope, maybe, or just the comfort of her presence. She doesn't know who he really is, not yet. To her, he's just a guy who likes coffee and tips well. Night, after the shop closes, Lucas waits for her outside. Ava locks the door, her coat pulled tight against the chilly New York wind. He steps forward, hands in his pockets, and she senses something different about him tonight. His usual calm is replaced by a nervous edge. "I've been meaning to talk to you," he says, his voice steady but his eyes searching hers. "I know about your brother." Ava freezes, her stomach dropping. How does he know about Jack? She hasn't told him anything. Before she can ask, he continues, "I can pay for his surgery, all of it. The hospital bills, the follow-up care, everything." Her heart leaps, hope surging through her. But then he adds, "But there's a condition." She stares at him, waiting. He takes a breath, then says it. "You have to sleep with me for one night." The words hit her like a punch. Her steps back, her face flushing with shock and anger. What kind of person says something like that? She wants to scream, to slap him, to walk away and never look back. But the image of Jack lying in a hospital bed flashes in her mind. His pale face, his weak smile. She's been fighting so hard to save him, and now this stranger, this man she thought she was starting to like, is dangling her brother's life in front of her like a twisted game. "Who are you?" she demands, her voice trembling. Lucas doesn't flinch. "My name is Lucas Grayson," he says simply, as if that explains everything. "And I can give you what you need." Ava's mind races. She's heard the name before, whispered in the news, a billionaire with a reputation for getting what he wants. But why her? Why this? She stands there, the streetlights casting long shadows around them. Her hands clench into fists, nails digging into her palms. She thinks of Jack, how he looked at her last night and said he didn't want to be a burden anymore. She thinks of the hospital bills she can't pay, the sleepless nights, the fear of losing him. Lucas watches her, his expression unreadable, but there's something in his eyes, a flicker of vulnerability she can't quite place. It's not lust, not greed, but something else. She hates him for this, for putting her in this position, but she's trapped. The silence stretches between them, heavy and tense. Finally, she lifts her chin, her voice barely above a whisper. "One night," she says. "That's it." Lucas nods, a faint smile tugging at his lips, though it doesn't reach his eyes. "One night," he agrees. As Ava walks away, her heart pounds in her chest. She doesn't know what she's just agreed to or what kind of man Lucas Grayson really is. All she knows is that Jack might live because of it, and that's enough for now. But deep down, a small part of her wonders why Lucas looked at her like that, like he was the one making a sacrifice, not her. The city hums around them, oblivious to the deal they've just made, a deal that will change everything. Ava stands outside Lucas Grayson's Manhattan apartment, her heart racing as she clutches her coat tighter. The building towers over her, all glass and steel, a stark contrast to the crumbling walk-up she calls home. She spent the day wrestling with his offer, torn between anger and desperation. Jack's face kept flashing in her mind, his frail hands gripping hers, his voice begging her not to worry. She called the hospital that morning, and the doctor's words echoed in her ears. Without surgery soon, Jack wouldn't make it past the month. So here she is, stepping into the unknown, ready to trade one night for her brother's life. She presses the buzzer, and a soft voice tells her to come up. The elevator ride feels endless, each floor ticking by like a countdown to something she can't name. Lucas opens the door, his blue eyes catching the light. He's dressed simply, a black sweater and jeans, nothing like the billionaire she imagined. "Come in," he says, stepping aside. The apartment is breathtaking, floor-to-ceiling windows showing off the New York skyline, but Ava barely notices. She stands stiffly in the living room, her hands clenched, waiting for him to make a move. Instead, he gestures to a plush sofa. "Sit," he says. "I'm not going to hurt you." His voice is calm, almost gentle, and it throws her off. She sits, her back rigid, watching him pour 2 glasses of water from a crystal pitcher. He hands her one and sits across from her, leaving a wide space between them. She doesn't touch the glass. "What do you want from me?" she asks, her tone sharp. Lucas leans back, studying her. "I want to know who you are," he says. "That's all." Eva blinks, confused. "You said one night," she snaps. "This isn't a game." "I'm here because I have to be." He nods, as if he expected that. "I know," he replies, "but I don't want what you think I want. I'm not after your body, Ava. I just need someone to stay with me tonight." She stares at him, trying to read his face. Is this some kind of trick? He takes a sip of water, then sets the glass down. "I've been alone a long time," he says quietly. "People look at me and see money, nothing else. I wanted to see if you'd say no, if you'd walk away. But you didn't. Why?" Her throat tightens. "Because of Jack," she says, her voice breaking. "He's all I have left." Lucas looks at her, really looks at her, and something shifts in his expression. "Tell me about him," he says. Ava hesitates, then starts talking. She tells him about Jack's laugh, how he used to draw comics before he got sick, how he still tries to make her smile even now. Lucas listens, his eyes never leaving her face. When she finishes, he surprises her again. "My mother left when I was 6, he says. "I woke up one day and she was gone. No note, no goodbye. I've been trying to figure out why ever since." Ava softens, just a little. "That's awful," she whispers. He shrugs. "It's why I don't trust people. But you're here for someone else. That's rare." The hours slip by as they talk. Lucas opens up about his childhood, the loneliness that followed him into adulthood, the fear of dying alone with this broken heart of his. Ava shares her dreams of writing, how she's had to put them aside for Jack. The tension in her shoulders eases, and she finds herself laughing at his dry humor, a sound she hasn't heard from herself in months. It's late when her eyes start to droop. "You should rest," Lucas says. She shakes her head, but he stands, offering his hand. "Come on," he says. "I'll take the couch." She lets him lead her to a guest room, but as she climbs into the bed, he lingers at the door. "Can I ask one more thing?" he says. She nods, half asleep. He steps closer and takes her hand, holding it gently. "Stay like this, just for a minute," he murmurs. Ava doesn't pull away. His touch is warm, steady, and she drifts off with his hand in hers. When she wakes, he's gone, but a note on the pillow says the money's been sent to the hospital. Jack's surgery is scheduled the next week, and Ava can breathe again. But Lucas doesn't disappear. He shows up at the coffee shop a few days later, ordering his usual black coffee. "Thanks for the other night," he says casually, like it was nothing. She blushes, unsure how to respond. "You didn't have to do that," she says. "Pay for Jack, I mean." He smirks. "I wanted to." After that, he keeps coming back. They fall into a rhythm, small moments that build into something more. He invites her to dinner one evening, a quiet place with dim lights and soft music. They walk through Central Park another night, the leaves crunching under their feet as they talk about everything and nothing. Ava starts to see past the billionaire facade, to the man who hides his pain behind a sharp smile. Lucas feels lighter with her, like the weight on his chest isn't just his failing heart. One rainy evening, everything changes. Ava's shift ends late and a downpour catches her outside the shop. Lucas pulls up in his car, offering her a ride. She hesitates, then climbs in, soaked to the bone. He drives her to his apartment, insisting she dry off. Inside, he hands her a towel and one of his sweaters, too big but warm. They sit by the window, watching the rain streak the glass. "You're different, you know," he says softly. She looks at him, her pulse quickening. "Different how?" she asks. He doesn't answer with words. Instead, he leans in and she meets him halfway. Their kiss is slow, tentative, then deepens with a hunger neither expected. The rain pounds outside as they move closer, clothes slipping away in the heat of the moment. It's not planned, not forced, just two people finding solace in each other. Afterward, they lie together, breathless, his arms around her. "I didn't mean for this," he whispers. She smiles, tracing his jaw. "Neither did I." The next morning, Ava leaves with a quiet goodbye, her heart a tangle of feelings. She doesn't know it yet, but that night planted a seed, a life growing inside her. Lucas watches her go, his chest aching for reasons beyond his illness. He wants to call her back, to tell her what she's starting to mean to him, but he doesn't. Not yet. They've crossed a line, and neither of them knows how to step back. For Ava, it's a moment of weakness, a lapse in her guarded world. For Lucas, it's a glimpse of something real, something worth holding on to. But life, as it often does, has other plans. The hospital calls that afternoon. Jack's surgery is set, and Ava throws herself into preparing for it. Lucas keeps his distance, unsure how to bridge the gap they've stumbled into. Neither of them realizes that one night, born from a strange deal and an unexpected connection, has already changed their futures forever. Ava sits by Jack's hospital bed, holding his hand as the machines beep softly around them. It's been a week since Lucas paid for the surgery, and today the doctors say Jack's new kidney is working. He's still weak, his face pale against the white sheets, but he squeezes her fingers and smiles. "You did it, sis," he whispers. Ava brushes his hair back, her chest tight with relief. "I'd do anything for you," she says, and she means it. The weight of the past months lifts just a little, and she lets herself hope for the first time in ages. She thinks of Lucas, the strange night they shared, the way he's woven himself into her life since then. She hasn't seen him since that rainy evening, the one that left her breathless and confused. But his absence feels louder than his presence ever did. That afternoon, she stops by the coffee shop to pick up her paycheck. Her boss hands her an envelope with a grin, saying someone left a big tip for her last week. Ava opens it and finds a note tucked inside, Lucas's neat handwriting scrawled across the paper. "Meet me tonight," it says. 7 p.m., my place. She stares at it, her stomach fluttering. Part of her wants to go, to see where this fragile thing between them might lead. Another part wants to run, to protect herself from whatever he is, a man who buys nights and breaks rules. She decides to go, if only to thank him again for Jack. She pulls on a simple dress, her hands trembling as she brushes her hair, and heads to his apartment. Lucas opens the door and Ava's breath catches. He looks tired, paler than usual, his blue eyes shadowed. "You okay?" she asks, stepping inside. He nods, but his smile doesn't reach his eyes. "Just a long day," he says, leading her to the living room. They sit, and for a moment it's like before, easy and warm. He asks about Jack, and she tells him how her brother's already planning to draw again. Lucas laughs, a soft sound that makes her heart ache. She's about to ask why he wanted to see her when he suddenly winces, pressing a hand to his chest. Ava's on her feet in an instant. "What's wrong?" she demands. He waves her off, but then he doubles over, gasping. She grabs his phone, dials 911, and within minutes paramedics burst through the door. At the hospital, Ava paces the waiting room, her mind racing. She's never seen Lucas like this, vulnerable, human. A doctor finally approaches, explaining that Lucas had a heart episode, a complication from his condition. He's stable now, but he needs a transplant soon or he won't make it. Ava's stomach drops. She didn't know it was this bad. She slips into his room, where he lies hooked to machines, his chest rising and falling slowly. He opens his eyes, managing a weak smile. "You didn't have to stay," he murmurs. She sits beside him, taking his hand. "I wanted to," she says. They sit in silence, her thumb brushing his knuckles, and she realizes how much he's come to mean to her. The next day, Ava overhears something that changes everything. She's in the hallway, bringing coffee back to Lucas's room, when she catches Eleanor's voice from around the corner. She's talking to the doctor, her tone cold and clipped. "He needs a heart, and we need it fast," Eleanor says. The doctor mentions Ava's name, something about her rare blood type matching Lucas's, pulled from Jack's medical records when she tested as a potential donor. Ava freezes, the coffee cups trembling in her hands. Eleanor's voice hardens. "If it comes to it, we'll make it happen." Ava's head spins. Are they planning to use her? To take her heart? She stumbles back to Lucas's room, her thoughts a jumbled mess, but he's asleep, unaware of the storm brewing inside her. That night, alone in her apartment, Ava takes a pregnancy test. She bought it on a hunch, her body feeling off since that rainy night with Lucas. The two pink lines stare back at her, and she sinks to the bathroom floor, tears streaming down her face. She's carrying his child, a piece of him growing inside her, and now she's terrified he might not live to know it. She decides to keep it a secret, at least until she figures out what Eleanor's words meant. The next morning, she gets a call from Columbia. Her application for a full scholarship to study in France has been accepted, a dream she'd almost forgotten. It's a way out, a chance to start over, but it means leaving Lucas, leaving Jack, leaving everything. She writes a letter to the university, asking to defer, her heart set on staying for Lucas. She can't abandon him now, not when he's fighting to live. but fate has other plans. Eleanor finds the letter in Ava's bag when she leaves it in Lucas's room during a visit. She sees an opportunity to get Ava out of the picture, to keep Lucas focused on survival, not some coffee shop girl. She takes Ava's phone from the bag, types a message, and sends it to Lucas. "I got the scholarship in France." It reads, "I'm leaving. Don't try to find me. Thanks for everything." Lucas wakes to the text, his heart sinking as he reads it. He stares at the screen, the words blurring through his tears. He thinks Ava chose her future over him, that the night they shared, the moments after, meant nothing to her. He doesn't know Eleanor sent it, doesn't know Ava's still in New York, planning to stay. He tells the doctors to move him to a private facility upstate, away from the city, away from her. He needs to focus on living, or at least surviving, without her. Ava finds out he's gone when she visits the hospital the next day. The nurse says he left that morning, no forwarding address. She tries calling, but his number's disconnected. Her chest tightens with panic, then anger. Did he leave because of the pregnancy? Did he somehow find out and run? She doesn't know. He thinks she's halfway to France. She sits on her bed that night, cradling her still flat stomach, whispering to the life inside her. "It's just us now," she says, her voice breaking. She decides to keep the baby no matter what. She'll raise it alone if she has to. A piece of Lucas she'll never let go. Months pass, and Ava's belly grows. Jack recovers slowly, moving back home with her help. She quits the coffee shop, takes a part-time job at a bookstore, and saves every penny for the baby. She names him Noah, after a character in one of her favorite novels, a name that feels like a promise. Labor comes on a snowy night, and she gives birth alone in a small hospital room, gripping the rails as pain tears through her. Noah's cries fill the air, and she holds him close, his tiny face a mirror of Lucas's blue eyes. She doesn't know that Lucas, miles away, nearly died that same night, his heart failing until a blood transfusion pulled him back. She doesn't know he gave that blood months ago when she fainted during a prenatal visit, a secret donation he'd arranged through Father Michael. All she knows is that she's a mother now, and she'll do anything to protect her son, even if it means burying the love she once felt for the man who left her behind. 6 years have passed since Ava last saw Lucas Grayson, and her life has settled into a quiet rhythm. She lives in a modest apartment on the edge of New York, raising Noah on her own. At 5 years old, Noah is a bright spark, with Lucas's piercing blue eyes and a smile that lights up her world. Ava works as a part-time secretary at a small law firm, her dreams of writing tucked away in a drawer alongside Noah's crayons. She's built a life for them, simple but steady, though the ache of losing Lucas never fully fades. She doesn't talk about him, not even to Jack, who's now healthy and studying art at a community college. But every time Noah asks about his father, her heart twists. She tells him gentle lies, that his dad was a good man who had to go away, and Noah accepts it with a child's trust. Across the city, Lucas has been fighting his own battles. After leaving New York, he spent years in and out of hospitals, his heart condition worsening until he could barely walk. Doctors kept him alive with medications and machines, but he refused to give up. He thought of Ava every day, her face the one thing that pulled him through the darkest nights. He believed she was in France, living the life she chose, and he tried to let her go, but he couldn't. Through Father Michael, a kind priest who'd known him since childhood, Lucas quietly kept tabs on her. He learned she never left, that she was raising a boy, and a suspicion grew in his chest, one he didn't dare voice. He sent money for Noah's preschool, anonymous donations for Jack's medical follow-ups, small acts to ease his guilt. He's back in New York now, weaker but alive, determined to see her one last time. Their paths cross on a crisp fall day. Ava is at the park with Noah, watching him chase leaves across the grass. He's been running a fever lately. Nothing serious, she thinks, just a cold. But today he stumbles, his little legs giving out, and Ava scoops him up, her stomach nodding with worry. She's about to call a cab when a familiar voice stops her. "Ava?" Lucas stands a few feet away, his coat hanging loose on a frame thinner than she remembers. His blue eyes lock onto hers, and time seems to freeze. She clutches Noah tighter, her breath catching. "What are you doing here?" she asks, her voice sharp with old pain. He steps closer, glancing at Noah, and his face softens. "I was walking by," he says. "Is he okay?" Ava nods, but Noah coughs, his cheeks flushed, and Lucas insists. "Let me take you to the hospital. I have a car." Ava wants to refuse, to walk away from the man who vanished, but Noah's fever spikes and she relents. They drive in silence, Lucas stealing glances at Noah in the back seat. At the hospital, a doctor examines him, running tests while Ava paces the waiting room. Lucas stays, sitting quietly, his hands clasped tight. The doctor returns with news that makes Ava's knees weak. Noah's fever isn't a cold, it's a rare infection tied to a blood disorder he's had since birth. He's stable now, but he'll need monitoring. Ava presses a hand to her mouth, tears welling up. Lucas reaches for her, then stops himself. "How long has he been sick?" he asks. Ava shakes her head. "I didn't know," she whispers. "He was fine until recently." The doctor pulls Lucas aside later, recognizing him from years ago. "There's something you should know," he says. "When Noah was born, his mother collapsed during delivery. She needed a transfusion, and you were the donor. Your blood type matched perfectly, saved them both." Lucas stares, his mind racing back to that night 6 years ago, when Father Michael called him to the hospital. He'd given blood without asking questions, never knowing it was for Ava, for his son. He turns to her, his voice trembling. "Noah's mine, isn't he?" Ava looks up, startled, then sees the truth in his eyes. She nods, tears spilling over. "Yes," she says. "He's yours." They move to a quiet corner of the hospital, Noah resting in a room nearby. Ava tells him everything. The night in the rain, the pregnancy she hid, the years she thought he'd abandoned her. "I found out after you helped Jack," she says. "I was going to tell you, but then you were gone." Lucas listens, his face crumpling as she speaks. "I didn't leave because of you," he says. "My mother sent a message from your phone, said you took a scholarship in France." "I thought you didn't want me." Ava's eyes widen, anger flaring. "Eleanor did that?" she asks. Lucas nods, shame washing over him. "I should have fought harder to find you. I was a fool." Ava wipes her tears, looking at him, really looking. He's thinner, older, but still the man who held her hand that strange night, who kissed her in the rain. "Why didn't you tell me about your heart?" she asks. He shrugs. "I didn't want you to stay out of pity. I wanted you to choose me." She laughs, a broken sound. "I did choose you," she says. "I gave up France for you. I stayed because I loved you." Lucas reaches for her hand, and this time she lets him take it. "I love you too," he says, his voice raw. "I never stopped. And Noah? He's everything I didn't know I needed." They sit together, hands clasped, watching Noah sleep through the glass. Ava tells him about their son, how he loves drawing like Jack, how he asks about his father with wide, curious eyes. Lucas smiles, tears glistening. "He's perfect," he says, "just like you." Ava leans her head on his shoulder, exhaustion and relief mingling inside her. She's carried so much alone, and now, here's Lucas, broken but alive, offering to carry it with her. She thinks of the years lost, the pain they've both endured, but also the child who binds them, a living proof of that fleeting love. Lucas breaks the silence. "I've been sick a long time," he says. "I didn't think I'd make it this far, but seeing you, seeing him, it's like I've been given a reason to keep going." Ava lifts her head, meeting his gaze. "Then keep going," she says. "For us." He nods, squeezing her hand. "I will," he promises. They stay there, the hospital hum fading into the background, a fragile hope blooming between them. Ava doesn't know what comes next, how they'll rebuild what was shattered, but for the first time in years, she feels whole. Noah stirs, his small hand twitching, and Lucas whispers, "I'm here, buddy. I'm not leaving again." Ava smiles through her tears, knowing they've found each other at last, and this time, they won't let go. Ava and Lucas sit together in the hospital, their hands still clasped as Noah sleeps peacefully in the next room. The air between them feels lighter now, the years of misunderstanding melting away with every word they share. Ava glances at Lucas, noticing the lines etched into his face, the weariness in his posture. He catches her looking and smiles, a small, tired curve of his lips. "I've missed that," he says. "What?" she asks. "You, looking at me like I'm more than just a broken heart," he replies. She squeezes his hand, her chest swelling with a warmth she hasn't felt in years. They're starting over, she thinks, and this time they have Noah to hold them together. But peace doesn't last long. A few days later, as Noah recovers at home, Ava gets a call from an unknown number. She answers, and a cold voice cuts through the line. "This is Henry Grayson, Lucas's brother," it says. "I hear you're back in his life. Stay away or I'll make sure you regret it." Ava's stomach drops. She's never met Henry, but she knows his reputation, a man driven by envy and greed. She tells Lucas that night, her voice trembling as she recounts the threat. He pulls her close, his jaw tight. "He's been after the family money for years," Lucas says. "He thinks I'm in the way. I'll handle it." Ava nods, trusting him, but a shadow of fear lingers in her mind. Henry doesn't wait. He files a lawsuit the next week, claiming Lucas is unfit to manage the Grayson fortune due to his illness. He demands guardianship over the estate, arguing that Ava and Noah are a distraction, a drain on resources. Lucas meets with lawyers, his health fragile but his resolve firm. "I won't let him touch you," he tells Ava, his blue eyes blazing. She believes him, but the stress takes its toll. Lucas collapses during a meeting, his heart failing under the strain, and he's rushed to the hospital again. Ava stays by his side, Noah clutching her hand as they wait for news. The doctor emerges, his face grim. "He needs a transplant now," he says. "We've moved him to the top of the list, but it's a long shot." Days turn into weeks, and Lucas clings to life, hooked to machines that beep in a steady rhythm. Ava spends every moment she can with him, reading to him from her old journal, telling him about Noah's drawings, anything to keep him here. Noah visits too, his small voice whispering stories about superheroes to his dad. Ava watches them, her heart breaking and mending all at once. She prays for a miracle, something to save the man she's loved through all the pain. Father Michael comes often, sitting with her in the quiet hours. He's been working behind the scenes, he says, calling in favors, reaching out to donors. "I've known Lucas since he was a boy," he tells her. "He's stubborn, but he's worth saving." Ava smiles through her tears, grateful for this gentle man who's become their anchor. Then the call comes. It's late, rain tapping against the hospital windows when the doctor rushes in. "We have a heart," he says. "A donor match just came through." Ava's knees buckle, relief flooding her. Lucas is wheeled into surgery and she waits, hours stretching into an eternity. Noah curls up in her lap, his head resting on her shoulder. "He'll be okay, right, Mommy?" he asks. She kisses his forehead, whispering, "Yes, baby." He has to be. When the doctor finally returns, his smile says it all. "The transplant worked," he says. "He's stable." Ava sobs, hugging Noah tight, a weight lifting she didn't know she could bear. Lucas wakes the next day, groggy but alive. Ava sits beside him, Noah perched on the bed, showing him a drawing of a family, 3 stick figures under a bright sun. "That's us," Noah says proudly. Lucas takes the paper, his hands trembling slightly, and looks at Ava. "Thank you for waiting," he says, his voice hoarse. She leans in, resting her forehead against his. "Thank you for coming back," she replied. They stay like that, a quiet moment of healing, until Henry's shadow looms again. He storms into the room, his face twisted with fury. "You think this changes anything?" he snarls. "I'll fight you in court until you're broke." Lucas sits up, weak but defiant. "Take it," he says. "The money, the company, all of it. I don't need it anymore. I have them." Henry freezes, stunned by the words. Ava looks at Lucas, her eyes wide. "You'd give it all up?" she asks. He nods, reaching for her hand. "You and Noah are worth more than any fortune," he says. "I've spent too long chasing things that don't matter." Henry scoffs. But there's nothing left to fight for. He walks out, defeated, leaving them in peace. Ava stares at Lucas, a mix of awe and love washing over her. She didn't expect this. Didn't know he could let go of everything he'd built. But she sees it now, the man he has become, the one who'd trade the world for a chance at a family. A few weeks later, Lucas is home, recovering in a small house Ava bought with money she'd secretly saved. She reveals her surprise one evening, sitting him down at the kitchen table. "I wrote a book," she says, pulling a paperback from a drawer. "It's about us. That night you changed everything and all the years after. I published it last year under a pen name. The royalties paid for this place." Lucas takes the book, his fingers tracing the title. "One Night's Prom." He opens it, reading the dedication. "To the man who gave me a reason to stay, and the boy who gave me a reason to fight." His eyes glisten as he looks up at her. "You're incredible," he says. She smiles, shy but proud. "I had to tell our story," she says. "It's how I kept you with me." That night, as a soft rain falls outside, Lucas pulls Ava close on the porch. Noah's asleep inside, his crayons scattered across the table. Lucas takes her hand, his touch stronger now, the new heart beating steady in his chest. "Marry me," he says, his voice low and sure. "I've wasted too much time not being yours." Ava's breath catches, tears welling up. She thinks of the night they met, the deal that broke her, the love that mended her. "Yes," she says, nodding through her smile. "Yes, 1,000 times." He kisses her, slow and deep, the rain a gentle chorus around them. Noah wakes just then, toddling out in his pajamas. "Are you my dad now?" he asks, rubbing his eyes. Lucas kneels, pulling him into a hug. "I've always been your dad, buddy," he says. Noah grins, wrapping his arms around them both. "Good," he says. "I like that." The days that follow are simple, perfect. Lucas heals, growing stronger with every sunrise. Ava writes again, her words flowing freely now, inspired by the life they're building. Noah draws pictures of their little family, taping them to the fridge. One afternoon they drive to a field outside the city, the grass golden in the late light. Lucas lifts Noah onto his shoulders, and Ava laughs as they chase each other, a kite soaring above them. She watches, her heart full, knowing this is what she fought for, what Lucas survived for. The camera lingers on them, a family born from a single night, a promise kept through years of pain. The voiceover fades in, soft and warm. From a deal made in desperation, they found a love that lasted forever, and in the end, that was everything.